Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. At least 20 people have reportedly been killed as soldiers opened fire on protesters in Nigeria's biggest city, Lagos. According to witnesses, 50 others are injured at a toll gate while protesting police brutality. Amnesty International says security forces used excessive force against the demonstrators. Authorities have imposed an indefinite 24-hour curfew on Lagos and other regions. "15 people have died and over a dozen injured in a stampede in Afghanistan's eastern Nangarhar province. Officials said the stampede ensued after 3,000 Afghans gathered to apply for visas to Pakistan in Jalalabad city. India has reported 717 COVID-19 deaths and over 54,000 infections overnight as the caseload has crossed 7.65 million. The virus has claimed 661 more lives in Brazil, raising the death toll over 154,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 19 people have died in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to 6,692. Globally, more than 1.12 million people have died from COVID-19 so far, with over 40.7 million infected. European Union member states have reached an agreement to reform the common agricultural policy after 2 years of discussions. The European Council says the reforms place a greater focus on environmental protection. The new reforms will come into effect in 2023 and include a 2-year learning period. These were the top stories. News in detail coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. At least 20 people have reportedly been killed as soldiers opened fire on protesters in Nigeria's biggest city, Lagos. According to witnesses, 50 others are injured in Lekki district while protesting police brutality. Amnesty International says security personnel used excessive force against the demonstrators. Authorities have imposed an indefinite 24-hour curfew on Lagos and other regions. Lagos State Governor says criminals have hijacked the protests to unleash mayhem. Protests, however, a now disbanded controversial police unit have been continuing for 2 weeks. The demonstrators call for more changes in the security forces as well as reforms to the way the country is run. Meanwhile, 15 people have died and over a dozen injured in a stampede in Afghanistan's eastern Nangarhar province. Officials say the stampede ensued after 3,000 Afghans gathered in Jalalabad city to apply for visas to Pakistan. They say the visa applicants jolted to secure their token from the consulate officials. They added 11 of the victims were women. The officials say the injured include several senior citizens. Now, Pakistan says it will raise the issue of the killing of a migrated Hindu family in India at every forum. Foreign Minister Shamimud Qureshi said India is shying away from sharing the details of the incident. Speaking in Parliament, Qureshi said the government will contact the international human rights organizations. He said Islamabad will apprise the organizations of the reservations of the Hindu community in Pakistan regarding the murders. Qureshi mentioned 11 members of a Hindu family were killed in India's Jodhpur city after they refused to spy on Pakistan. Earlier, Pakistan Hindu Council Chief Dr. Ramesh Kumar called for a transparent inquiry into the incident. The victim's family accuses India's ruling BJP and the extremist RSS of being behind the murders. Moving on now, France is set to disband a Muslim organization following the beheading of a teacher who showed blasphemous cartoons to his pupils. The decision follows President Emmanuel Macron's pledge to introduce regressive measures that largely target Muslims. Now, Muslim activists have accused Macron of trying to repress Islam in the country. France has the largest Muslim population in Europe at around 5 million, mostly from North Africa. Meanwhile, Israeli warplanes have carried out airstrikes on the central and southern parts of Gaza Strip. Israeli army said the strike was a response to a rocket fired from the Palestinian enclave towards Israel. Spokesperson Avichai Adrai said Israeli jets struck an underground facility allegedly belonging to Hamas. But witnesses stated only the agricultural land east of Deir al-Balah city in central Gaza was targeted with 3 missiles. There was no immediate reports of casualties. The raid was launched a few hours after Israel said it discovered a tunnel crossing from the Gaza Strip into Israel. Now, Russia has called for the joint efforts of the regional states for peace in the Middle East. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said unilateral actions lead to a deadlock. At the United Nations Security Council debate on the Middle Eastern situation, Lavrov said all countries must respect the sovereignty of Middle Eastern states in strict accordance with international law. He added, accusing only one of the parties of all the regional troubles is a dangerous practice. The foreign minister said Moscow believes all major stakeholders are interested in a peaceful and predictable region. He stressed it is necessary to counter sanctions and other provocations from any side to ensure peace and security in the region. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the country is headed towards economic recovery. The Prime Minister said the country recorded a current account surplus of $73 million in September. In a tweet, Prime Minister Imran Khan raised the current account surplus of the first quarter of 2020 to $792 million. The country registered $1,492 million deficit for the same period last year. The Premier said Pakistan's exports grew by 29%, while remittances increased by 9% in the last month. Still in Pakistan, where the coronavirus has claimed 19 more lives, with the death toll rising to 6,692. The Health Ministry said 660 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. The ministry added there are over 9,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 324,000 countrywide cases, more than 308,000 have recovered. The ministry said more than 142,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported around 101,000 cases, while in the capital, Islamabad, some 18,000 people have been infected. Also, India has reported 717 COVID-19 deaths and over 54,000 infections overnight, as the caseload has crossed 7.65 million. COVID-19 has claimed 661 more lives in Brazil, pushing the death toll to over 154,000. While globally, the virus has claimed more than 1 million lives and infected over 40 million people. Details in this report.
After weeks of rising cases and warnings in several regions, a second wave of the coronavirus has now firmly taken hold across much of the world. Europe continues to break records as Spain is set to become the first European nation with over 1 million infections. The number of hospitalizations doubling each week in Belgium. The government has ordered bars and restaurants to close. The United Kingdom has resorted to extraordinary measures in vaccine development as the island nation hit another record high in the daily COVID-19 infections. However, London's decision to deliberate infecting young volunteers to accelerate the development of a cure has raised concerns with the WHO.
What is critical is that if people are considering this, it must be overseen by an ethics committee, and the volunteers must have full consent, and they must select the volunteers in order to minimize their risk, because you will be challenging people with a virus that we do not have a treatment for.
In Latin America, the total number of infections has passed 10.5 million. Meanwhile, Russia has also reached yet another peak of single-day infections. But fresh restrictions to contain the outbreak in the virus hotspots haven't gone down well with the people.
Мне кажется, этого не случится, если честно.
I do not think lockdown will happen, to be frank. It wouldn't be beneficial for authorities. They will need to pay emergency allowance. Much cheaper if people stay home self-isolated. But I do not like that people can get beaten for not wearing masks in public.
Meanwhile, New Zealand is once again under the virus radar as 25 new cases were detected overnight.
Well, now moving on, European Union member states have reached an agreement to reform the common agricultural policy after 2 years of discussions. The European Council says the reforms place a greater focus on environmental protection. The talks concluded with an agreement following a proposal by German Agricultural Minister Julia Klöckner. Speaking at a press conference, Julia termed the agreement as a milestone. The proposal will extend a greater level of freedom to member states on how they achieve agreed upon goals. The bloc has set conservation of nature, environmental protection and ensuring food quality as the chief goals. The new reforms will come into effect in 2023 and include a 2-year learning period. Also, the European Union has launched legal action against Cyprus and Malta over their investor citizenship programs. The golden passport schemes allow wealthy foreigners to buy citizenship in exchange for an investment in both countries. Now, in a statement, the Commission said the schemes are illegal and undermine the essence of EU citizenship. The European Commission has also written to the two countries to demand explanations. It has warned the schemes increase the risks of money laundering, tax evasion and corruption. Cyprus has already said it will halt its scheme next month. Malta says it's replacing the scheme with a new program with the tighter vetting of applicants. The Cypriot and Maltese governments have been given 2 months to take action. Moving on, thousands take to the streets in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, against President Joko Widodo's new jobs law. It's the latest in a series of rallies opposing legislation that the government says is needed to attract investment. Protesters, including students and labor groups, demanded the president to revoke the so-called Omnibus Bill. They say labor unions have already taken action to file a judicial review to the Constitutional Court. The government says the new law will lead to widespread employment generation. But trade unions, students, academics and civil society groups say the legislation reduces protections for workers. Now, 5 people have been killed in an explosion in Karachi city of Pakistan's southern Sindh province. Rescue officials say 20 others were wounded in the blast that occurred in a multi-story building. Windows of nearby buildings as well as some vehicles were shattered by the explosion. Police say the cause of the blast is not yet known. However, they said gas cylinder may be a cause of the explosion. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the United Nations has lamented the slow pace of progress in women's rights globally. In the World's Women 2020 report, the United Nations warned of a further slowdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. The report revealed the situation has not improved in the last 24 years with respect to employment and domestic violence. It said COVID-19 lockdowns also increased the risk of domestic violence. It noted women were more likely to be infected from COVID-19 as they constitute 70% of healthcare workers. Fewer than half of the world's women were employed in the paid labor market in comparison to 3/4 of men. Job market participation was particularly low in Asia and Africa, where rates fell below 30%. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said no country has achieved gender equality. Now, NASA has made history by collecting its first ever sample from an asteroid over 100 million miles from Earth. Details in this report.
Asteroids are among the leftover debris from the solar system's formation some 4.5 billion years ago. Scientists believe asteroids and comets crashing into early Earth may have delivered organic compounds and water that seeded the planet for life. Atomic-level analysis of samples from the new asteroid could provide a key evidence to support that hypothesis. NASA launched its minivan-sized OSIRIS-REx spacecraft in 2016 from the Kennedy Space Center, the journey to the new.
It's just scientifically really exciting. You know, it's the first time that we've, been to the surface, we tried to touch the surface of another solar system object the first time that NASA has tried to do that and in order to bring back the sample, in a really long time. And the first time that NASA has tried to do it on an asteroid, there was a Japanese mission called Hayabusa that did something like this on a different type of asteroid a few years ago.
The spacecraft made a 4-hour descent towards the rugged surface of the celestial body to collect the sample. It could take up to 10 days to determine if the OSIRIS-REx has achieved its aim to collect at least 60 grams of dirt and gravel. The collected samples are scheduled to land on Earth, encased in a special return capsule in September 2023.
Now, the World Economic Forum has warned the rise of machines and automation will eliminate 85 million jobs by 2025. In a report, the forum says routine or manual jobs in administration and data processing are most at threat of the automation. It says the robot revolution will also create 97 million jobs worldwide, but put some communities at risk. The report adds new jobs will emerge in care, big data and the green economy. It warns workers now face a double threat from accelerating automation and the fallout from the COVID-19 recession. It says these two things have deepened inequalities across labor markets and reversed gains in employment. Meanwhile, most stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading in positive territory as investors continue to watch for developments on the U.S. coronavirus stimulus talks. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has advanced over 0.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 has edged up, while the Topix Index has gained close to 1%. South Korea's Kospi has added marginally. Meanwhile, shares in Australia have inched up fractionally, but mainland Chinese stocks have bucked the trend. The Shanghai Composite has edged down, while the Shenzhen Component slipped over 1%. And with that, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.